When you miss the postseason in New York, there's no such thing as a quiet offseason. And this one is shaping up to be a big one for the New York Mets. And joining me now from Las Vegas at the GM meetings is New York Post Mets beat reporter Mike Puma, who's going to share with me his three bold moves that the Mets need to make this winter. We're going to talk about how realistic those moves are, what they say about the front office's direction, and what fans should expect as the hot stove heats up. Mike, what's going on? How you doing?
Dexter, great day. How are you?
I'm good. I'm well. I can't complain at all whatsoever. The offseason is about to heat up. So, Mike, as we get started, you have three bold moves that you believe the Mets need to make this offseason. So we're going to talk about them, but share with the people what those three bold moves are.
Well, the first one, and I don't know how I would handicap the chances of this happening but re-sign Pete Alonso and Edwin Diaz. I'll get into it in a minute about why. The second one would be to go out and acquire a frontline starting pitcher. And the third one would be to look to trade from your young controllable players to try and balance out the roster in some other areas.
Okay, Mike, so those are three really good ones. Let's start with the first one that you mentioned, re-sign Pete Alonso and Edwin Diaz, which I think a lot of Mets fans would like to see. And you've been adamant, you've wrote about this, that re-signing Alonso and Diaz should be the Mets' first order of business. Why do you think that these two deals are so crucial to the franchise's offseason direction?
I think the thing to look at with Alonso is there's not a lot of that kind of raw power out there on the open market, and certainly from the right side, and that's something they need. This is trending toward becoming a left-handed hitting lineup, and Alonso from the right side, you're going to pencil in 35 to 40 home runs a year from him. I understand there's questions about his defense, but you have to look going forward here that he's going to, this next contract, he'll probably spend most of it as the DH. But, this is a franchise type player, and an anchor to your lineup. I don't think you're going to be able to replace Pete Alonso if he goes elsewhere.
Yeah, that'll be tough to repair. What about Diaz? Why do you think he's paramount to the direction of where they're trying to go this offseason?
Now Diaz is in a situation where he's 31 years old. He opted out of his deal that would have covered 2 more years at $37 million. So it's probably going to take, I don't think you're going to get him back on a 3-year deal. You're probably going to get going to take 4 years to get him back, maybe a fifth, but probably 4 years. And I just think that, and listen, that's such a volatile position, but if you're looking to win here in the next couple of years with this group, Edwin Diaz gives you that best chance. And if at the back end of that contract, the last couple of years of that deal, he's not anything like the Edwin Diaz we saw this season, so be it. And even if that means eventually moving him out of the 9th inning role, and who knows if he'll get to that point. You see guys still doing it at a high level. Some of them into their mid and late 30s. Kenley Jansen certainly an example of that, and Aroldis Chapman, and it's a gamble that you overpay, but guys like Edwin Diaz don't exactly fall out of trees.
No, they do not. And the Mets would love to bring both of them back. Fans would love to see both of them back. Let me just shift back to Alonso real quick, Mike, because when you look at Alonso's market, right, contract terms, age, and his role as a face of the franchise, what's a realistic number the Mets should be willing to offer him to keep him in Queens long term? We heard earlier in the offseason that he and his agent Scott Boras were looking for 7 years, but what do you think is a realistic number that the Mets should be willing to offer him?
Yeah, I'm sure they're going to look for 7, and I think if Pete can get 5 years from the Mets, that's something he should jump at. 5 years, maybe a shade under $30 million a year. Maybe you're talking in the 140 to 150 range, and I think there's a good chance that kind of deal gets it done. yeah, there's going to be risk at the back end of that deal, but I think it's one that would make a lot of sense for both sides. Now, yeah, 7 years. If I were the Mets, I wouldn't touch that. And maybe somebody's willing to go there. Maybe the Red Sox are willing to do that, or the Angels or the Rangers. I don't know, but if I'm the Mets, I'm certainly willing to go 5 years to bring
Yeah,
back a player Pete Alonso's caliber.
Yeah, 7 feels like a little bit too much for him and where he's at in his age. Just back to Diaz too, because we saw, it's been up and down with him in his return from injury, although he was good most of last year. How much faith do you think the front office still has in him being their anchor closer? You just talked about it. Maybe he's not as good on the back end of a contract. And do they have to protect themselves with bullpen depth in case his velocity or durability fluctuates again?
Yeah, and that's something they'll look to do this offseason. You've got a few guys coming back. You got AJ Minter now; he's coming back from mostly a lost season to injury. But you got a guy like Brazaban who pitched well for you. But you're gonna have to go out and add to that bullpen, and but certainly not at the level of an Edwin Diaz. But the kind of reliever you're going to look to add, and I'm not saying they're going to bring him back. Ryan Stanek now had a disappointing season, but coming into the season, that looked like a pretty good move, bringing him in to be your eighth inning guy. Tyler Rogers, they got at the trade deadline. Maybe that's somebody you look to resign. Gregory Soto from the left side, or another free agent. So those are the kind of moves they're going to have to make, because they certainly don't have enough in-house right now to consider it a complete bullpen, even if Diaz is back.
Yeah, no, there's something they're definitely going to have to consider. Okay, so you talked about bringing back Diaz, bringing back Alonso. Your second thing you thought the Mets really need to do was acquire top-of-the-rotation starter, and I think it's pretty clear. Most people would agree. The Mets clearly need a frontline ace-type starter to stabilize this rotation. Who do you see as the most realistic targets through free agency or trade as the market takes shape here in this offseason?
Yeah, and I have a hard time answering that question, because I don't know who the most realistic is. I mean, I think the one I would certainly exhaust every option to see is if the Tigers are going to trade Tariq Skubal, because that is the move that would push your rotation over the top. And yeah, it's going to take a lot to get him away from the Tigers. You're going to sacrifice at least three top 20 prospects, and it's the thing with him is he's not guaranteed beyond this season, because he can become a free agent after one more year. So I think if I'm the Mets, I'm making that phone call and staying on it and until the Tigers definitely say, yeah, we're not trading this guy. And it may very well be that they're going to hold on to him and try and make another run with him, or at least till the trade deadline. And then, the free agent market, you have guys like Ranger Suarez, Framber Valdez. So there's some quality left-handers out there. But that would, if you could put a top guy like that as the number one in your rotation, and then look to maybe put Nolan McLean behind him, and then just fill in behind that, you immensely upgrade your starting pitching.
Yeah, it would. Skubal would be a big prize. Alcantara's name is going to be out there for trades. Joe Ryan, maybe a possibility there too. And that kind of leads me to this here, Mike, because if the Mets miss out on the big names, whether it's through trade or free agency, do you see David Stearns going the depth route again with like multiple mid-rotation arms, or is landing a true ace non-negotiable to compete in 2026?
I don't know if it's non-negotiable, but, and they certainly have a lot of those kind of mid-range arms right now. But the one thing you look at is you really don't know a lot of we still don't know what Brandon Sproat is, and we saw Jonah Tong come up at the end of last season and struggle. And, both of these guys might need a little more seasoning at AAA to begin the season. You have Christian Scott coming back. He's kind of an intriguing piece. He missed last year rehabbing from Tommy John surgery. So that's another name to keep an eye on. And you have Sean Manaea, as you know, you have Senga and David Peterson and Clay Holmes. So there's a lot of kind of mid-rotation arms there. And so I don't know if you necessarily have to go out and add another starter if you're not getting one of those, high top of the rotation type. But, I think that's got to be the focus is moving the rotation forward, and one of those top guys gets you there.
Yeah, that would be the dream for the Mets fans. I'm going to ask you about this player, even because just kind of adjacent to pitching, but there's a lot of buzz around Japanese star Munetaka Murakami being posted. How do you see the Mets balancing their pitching needs while also monitoring the international market for opportunities like maybe bringing him into the lineup?
Yeah, and that's another thing to keep an eye on here. And we know David Stearns has scouted Japan. Last year he went over to see Roki Sasaki pitch over there. The Mets try to get involved with him. And before that, it was Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who the thing is with these Japanese players, I think the assumption is that they're all going to go to the Dodgers, but that eventually the Dodgers aren't going to be able to take on all of them. So the Mets, I think the Mets will be involved with some of these guys. It's just a matter of if they fit and, which ones don't go to the Dodgers.
Yeah, Dodgers, you're right. Can't sign all of them. Mets will get some. Other teams will get some.
They're not going to get all of them. They'll probably get most of them, but not all of them.
Not all of them. Not all of them are going to want to go play with Yamamoto or Ohtani. You're right about that. Okay, your last bold move that you had, to me, it was the most intriguing, right? Because you said trade controllable young talent to improve roster balance. So trading from the Mets' young talent pool to strengthen the overall roster. So with that being said, which positions do you think are most in need of upgrades right now on this Mets roster?
Well, I look at center field right now as a kind of a gaping hole. You really don't have much of it. Now Tyrone Taylor's been a nice defensive player for you, but we saw how the Mullins trade worked out last year, not well. You were playing Jeff McNeil in center field a lot. That's not ideal. So I think that's what I would be looking at if I'm dealing some of my young talent, whether it's from that group of young pitchers we mentioned, or I would take McClain off the table. I wouldn't make him a trade possibility, but maybe Tong, maybe Sproat, a kid like Santucci down on the farm who's earned some strong reviews. Brett Beatty's got some trade value here. Now the thing is, if you subtract him, I don't know what you do with third base unless you're planning to go out and sign Alex Bregman, which you could do. But Beatty's probably among the non-pitchers got the highest trade value in the group. We saw Mark Vientos's value drop last season based on his performance, and Ronnie Mauricio really didn't get to play a lot the last month and a half, 2 months or so. So, but he's young enough, and there's enough raw ability there that I think you can get something for him. But I think Beatty's certainly, based on what we saw the second half of last season, the guy who can bring you something back, provided you have a plan for third base.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the Mets' plan is there with these young players and who they might or might not move. But when you look at the guys, you kind of touched on this a little bit with McClain. Sounds to me like you think he's an untouchable. So when you look at, I'll put him in here, and Brandon Sproat, Jonah Tong, do you think any of them should be untouchable, or is everybody on the table if it means getting proven major league talent, especially if you can get a frontline starter?
Yeah, and I think anybody beyond McClain, I would be open to listen on and consider. And Maybe there's a deal that would, I think you'd really have to be blown away to deal McLean. I wouldn't make anybody untouchable, but I think I would make a guy like McLean 95% untouchable, and then the others you certainly listen on, and they are developing some highly regarded young pitching, and if that's what it's going to take to move this thing forward, I would go that direction.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see. I guess that brings me to my last thing here. You will talk with David Stearns. He'll meet with the media tomorrow in Las Vegas at the GM meetings. What's your sense here, Mike? Do you believe David Stearns is more likely to make a blockbuster level move this winter, or a series of smarter supporting cast trades to rebalance the roster around Alonso and Soto and Lindor?
Yeah, and his calling card here has kind of been the latter. Now, listen, last year they went out and signed Juan Soto, and we know that was Steve Cohen driving that bus. Uh, you know, and Stearns hasn't really shown us an appetite to go big here. So, if I were handicapping it right now, I would think it's more the second thing you mentioned. But they're also coming off a season here where they missed the playoffs and the expectations were high. So maybe that kind of shifts his thinking a little bit. Whereas last offseason, well, they had gone to the small route previously, and it had worked. Bringing in Severino and Manaea and that crew, and that got them to the NLCS. So this year, it's the disappointment factor maybe skews his thinking a little bit.
Yeah, I wonder how it skews his thinking. I'll tell you what, the fan base, they absolutely are looking for a big move. He does a lot of talk about them wanting the Mets to go get Scoobel. It'll be interesting to see what they do. But those are Mike Puma's three biggest needs, bold moves that the Mets must make this offseason. We'll see if they do any of them. Hopefully they do all of them and they listen to Mike, but who knows? We won't know. That is Mike Puma. He is out covering the Mets at the GM meetings in Las Vegas, and we're doing that for us here with the New York Post. Mike, appreciate the time here on Straight Outta Flushing. We'll talk soon.
All right, Dexter, take care.